Imagine this. 25 of the world's most dangerous cryptographers, military hackers, and mathematical geniuses are locked in a room. They have 48 hours to crack a code worth $3 billion. If they fail, a criminal empire crumbles. For 2 days, they sweat, they scream, and they fail. Then a waitress, a girl making $4.25 an hour plus tips, wearing a stained apron, walks by. She looks at the screen for exactly 6 seconds, whispers 3 words, and changes the underworld forever. This isn't a fairy tale. This is the story of how Cyrus Valenti found his queen in the dirt, and why you never underestimate the person refilling your coffee. Sit down. This gets messy. The rain in Chicago didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Inside the VIP back room of the Velvet Lounge, the air was thick enough to choke a man. It smelled of stale cigar smoke, ozone from overheating server racks, and the distinct, metallic scent of fear. Cyrus Valenti sat at the head of a mahogany table that was worth more than most people's houses. He was 32, dressed in a bespoke charcoal Brioni suit that fit his broad shoulders like armor. He didn't look like a thug. He looked like a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, which, in a way, he was. The only difference was that his board of directors carried suppressed Sig Sauers, and his hostile takeovers involved body bags. But tonight, Cyrus was losing. "Explain it to me again," Cyrus said. His voice was quiet. Cyrus never shouted. Shouting was for men who didn't have control. Dr. Aris Kovic, a former NSA cryptographer who had been dishonorably discharged for selling state secrets, wiped sweat from his balding forehead with a trembling handkerchief. He was one of the 25 experts Cyrus had cycled through in the last 48 hours. "Mr. Valenti," Kovic stammered, pointing at the single massive monitor mounted on the wall. It's not a standard encryption. The Sanctum Ledger wasn't just password protected by your late father. It's a shifting algorithm, a polymorphic cipher." "English, Kovic," Cyrus said, lighting a cigarette. The flame illuminated the sharp angles of his jaw and the cold, predator-like focus in his eyes. "It changes," Kovic said, his voice cracking. "Every time we enter a wrong sequence, the logic of the lock rewrites itself. We have been trying to brute force the firewall using the cluster computers you provided. But we are locked out. The dead man's switch is active. If we don't input the correct semantic key in..." He checked his watch, his hands shaking so hard the Rolex rattled. 58 minutes, the ledger deletes itself. The accounts, the blackmail material on the senators, the location of the reserves. It all vanishes. Cyrus exhaled a plume of smoke. "So you're telling me that I paid you $2 million, and you're going to let my empire evaporate because you can't figure out a riddle my father wrote before he died?" "It's not a riddle," Kovic protested, desperate. "It's chaos mathematics. We've tried the Fibonacci sequences. We've tried the Enigma variations. We've run it through the Deep Blue AI protocol. It's uncrackable without the physical key." Cyrus stood up. The room, filled with 5 other hackers and 3 armed guards, went dead silent. "My father," Cyrus said, walking slowly toward the screen, "didn't know how to turn on a computer until 2005. He didn't use chaos mathematics. He used a notebook and a pen. You're overthinking it because you're arrogant." "Sir, with all due respect..." "Get out," Cyrus said. "Sir, get out. Take a break. Go to the bar. Get some coffee. If you aren't back in 10 minutes with a fresh perspective, I'm going to have Victor break your fingers one by one so you can't type the wrong code ever again." Kovic turned pale. He nodded frantically and scrambled out of the room, the other technicians following him like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Cyrus was left alone with his second-in-command, Cale. "Boss," Cale said, his voice low, "we're running out of time. The Commission is breathing down our necks. If we lose the ledger, the Russians move in on the south side by tomorrow morning." "I know," Cyrus snapped. He rubbed his temples. He was exhausted. He hadn't slept in 3 days. He needed caffeine, and he needed a moment to think without the hum of servers and the smell of cowardice. "Let's go to the front. I need a clear head." "The front? Ideally, sir, we should stay secured. I own the building, Cale. I want a coffee from a pot that hasn't been sitting in this room for 6 hours. Cyrus pushed through the heavy soundproof doors and walked out into the main club area. Since it was a Tuesday afternoon, the club was closed to the public. The neon lights were off. The only illumination came from the service lights over the bar, and that was where he saw her. Nora Solis was invisible. She had perfected the art of it. She was 24, with messy dark hair tied back in a utilitarian bun and eyes the color of oxidized copper. Her uniform was a size too big, hanging off a frame that was too thin. She had been working at the Velvet Lounge for 3 months, and in that time she had spoken maybe 50 words to the management. "Yes, sir. Right away, sir. Sorry about the wait." She was the ghost who wiped the tables, the shadow who polished the glasses. Nora wasn't just a waitress. 7 years ago, she had been a prodigy. She had been accepted into MIT at 16 on a full scholarship for theoretical mathematics. But life doesn't care about potential. Life cares about debt. When her father, a brilliant but addicted gambler, had racked up 6 figures in debt to the wrong people, Nora dropped out. She worked 3 jobs to pay off the sharks. Then her father got sick. Cancer, the slow and expensive kind. The medical bills ate everything else. He died 6 months ago, leaving her with nothing but a rusted Honda Civic, a crushing pile of invoices, and a mind that never, ever stopped working. She saw patterns everywhere. She looked at the floor tiles and saw geometric fractals. She looked at the tips left on the tables and calculated the statistical probability of the next customer's generosity. It was a curse. She couldn't turn it off. Tonight, the club was supposed to be empty, but the suits in the back room had been buzzing all day. She knew who they were. Everyone knew who Cyrus Valenti was. You didn't work in this city without knowing the name of the predator at the top of the food chain. She was scrubbing the mahogany bar top when the double doors swung open. Cyrus Valenti walked in. He looked like a storm cloud in a suit. He radiated a dangerous, kinetic energy. Following him was Cale, his muscular bodyguard who looked like he chewed rocks for breakfast. Nora kept her head down. "Be invisible," she told herself. "Just wipe the wood. You are furniture." Cyrus sat on a bar stool 3 feet away from her. He placed a tablet on the counter, face up. "Coffee," Cyrus said. "Black." "Yes, sir," Nora whispered. She turned to the machine. Her hands were steady, but her heart hammered against her ribs. She poured the dark liquid into a pristine white cup. As she turned back to serve him, her eyes inadvertently brushed across the tablet screen Cyrus had thrown down. It was a live feed of the monitor in the back room. Nora froze, just for a fraction of a second. On the screen was a sequence. It was a grid of letters, numbers, and symbols. To the average person, it looked like gibberish. To the hackers in the back, it was a polymorphic cipher. To Nora, it was music. It was a grid of 64 characters, but the spacing was irregular. Space, letter, space, space, letter. Her brain did that thing it always did, the snap. It was like a camera shutter clicking shut. She didn't want to solve it. She was tired. She just wanted to go home and sleep, but the pattern clawed at her eyes. 4/4 time signature, her mind whispered. It's not code. It's rhythm. She set the coffee down in front of Cyrus. "Anything else, sir?" she asked, her voice raspy. Cyrus didn't look at her. He was staring at the tablet, rubbing his face. No. Just silence. Nora nodded and stepped back. She should have walked away. She should have gone to the kitchen. But then Kovich, the sweaty expert, burst through the doors from the back hallway, followed by 2 other men. They were arguing loudly. "It's an RSA 2048 encryption." "No," one of them shouted. "We need a quantum key. It's not RSA, you idiot," Kovich yelled, waving his hands. "It's a variation of the Vigenère square. But the keyword is shifting based on the timestamp." Cyrus slammed his hand on the bar. The sound was like a gunshot. "I said silence!" Cyrus roared. The men froze. Cyrus picked up the tablet and shoved it toward Kovich. "Look at this. You have 40 minutes left. The screen is mocking you. My father wasn't a mathematician. He was a bootlegger who liked opera and boxing." "Why is there a % sign next to the letter Q?" Kovich squinted. It's clearly a syntax error in the code, sir. A decoy." Nora was wiping a glass. She couldn't help it. She mumbled, barely audible. "It's not a syntax error. It's a rest note." The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of a predator hearing a twig snap. Cyrus slowly turned his head. He didn't look at Kovich. He looked at Nora. "What did you say?" he asked. His voice was terrifyingly calm. Nora's blood ran cold. She gripped the rag in her hand. "Stupid, stupid, stupid, stupid." "Nothing, sir," she said quickly, lowering her eyes. I'm sorry. I'll go to the kitchen." "Stay right there," Cyrus commanded. He stood up and walked the 3 steps to where she stood behind the bar. He towered over her. He smelled of expensive cologne and tobacco. "You said it's a rest note," Cyrus said. "Explain." "Sir, she's just a waitress." Cale stepped in, his hand moving toward his jacket. "She doesn't know anything. I'll get rid of her." "I am talking to her," Cyrus said, not breaking eye contact with Nora. "You looked at the screen. You saw the grid. What did you see?" Nora looked up. She saw the exhaustion in Cyrus's eyes, but she also saw intelligence. He wasn't like the men in the back room who were obsessed with their own cleverness. He just wanted the answer. She took a breath. If she was going to die, she might as well be right. "The experts are looking for a mathematical formula," Nora said, her voice gaining a little strength. "They think the symbols are variables. They aren't." She pointed a shaking finger at the tablet on the bar. "Your father. You said he liked opera." Cyrus frowned. "Yes, Puccini, Verdi." "The grid is 8 by 8, Nora said, speaking faster now. 64 squares. But look at the distribution of the symbols, the percentage sign, the ampersand. They appear at intervals of 3, then 4, then rest. It's sheet music written in ACI characters." Kovich let out a scoffing laugh. "Sheet music? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Little girl, this is military-grade encryption, not a piano lesson." "Shut up," Cyrus hissed at Kovich. He turned back to Nora. "Go on." "The Q isn't a letter," Nora said, her mind racing. In the old typewriter ciphers used during Prohibition, specific keys mapped to musical notations to smuggle messages past the feds. If you treat the grid as a staff... She grabbed a cocktail napkin and a pen from her apron. She didn't ask for permission. She slammed the napkin on the bar and began to draw lines. The % sign is a treble clef. The sequence starts here. She tapped the screen. B-A-C-H. "Bach?" Cale asked, confused. "No," Nora said. B-A-C-H is a musical motif, but it's transposed. If you shift every letter down by the interval of a major third, which is the opening interval of Tosca, an opera, the letters change." She scribbled furiously on the napkin. "B becomes G, A becomes F, C becomes A, H becomes E, G, F, A, E," Nora whispered. She looked up at Cyrus. "Does that mean anything to you, G, F, A, E?" Cyrus stared at the napkin. His eyes went wide. His mask of indifference cracked. "Grandfather. First Avenue. East," Cyrus whispered. "No," Kovich interrupted. "That's too simple. It has to be a numeric key." "It's not a location," Nora said, cutting him off. "It's the keypad pattern." She grabbed the tablet. "May I?" Cyrus didn't speak. He just nodded. Nora's fingers hovered over the digital interface. The keypad on the screen is numeric, 1 through 9. If you trace the shape of the letters G, F, A, and E on a standard telephone keypad. 4, 3, 2, 3. "Stop," Cyrus said. He took the tablet from her. He looked at the countdown. 0 hours, 3 minutes, and 45 seconds. He looked at Kovich, who was shaking his head in disbelief. Then he looked at Nora. "If you're wrong," Cyrus said softly, The system wipes everything. $3 billion. Gone. I'm not wrong, Nora said. She didn't know where the confidence came from. Maybe she was just tired of men like Kovich, thinking they owned the world because they had degrees. Your father didn't trust computers. He trusted Tosca. He trusted the music. Cyrus turned the tablet around. He typed in the sequence Nora had indicated. Not the numbers, but the pattern corresponding to the musical transposition. He hit enter. The screen went black. Cale drew his gun. She bricked it. Nora stopped breathing. Then a green line of text appeared. Access granted. Welcome, Cyrus. The heavy sound of the magnetic locks in the safe room disengaging echoed through the quiet club. Cyrus stared at the screen for a long time. The experts were gaping, their mouths open like fish. Kovich looked like he was about to vomit. Cyrus slowly set the tablet down. He turned to Nora. She was hugging her tray to her chest, trying to fade back into the background. "What is your name?" Cyrus asked. "Nora," she whispered. "Nora Solis." "Nora Solis," Cyrus repeated, testing the weight of the name on his tongue. "You just did in 60 seconds what 25 men couldn't do in 2 days." He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a money clip, and tossed a stack of $100 bills onto the bar. It must have been $5,000. "Take the night off," he said. Nora stared at the money. It was more than she made in 4 months. I can't take that." "It's a tip," Cyrus said. He signaled to Cale. "Clear the room. Fire Kovich. Fire all of them, and bring the car around." "Yes, boss." Cyrus looked at Nora one last time. There was something in his gaze, not just gratitude. It was calculation, curiosity, and hunger. "Don't go far, Nora Solis," he said. "I have a feeling I'm going to have a lot more puzzles for you." He walked towards the back room to claim his empire. Nora stood there, her heart pounding, looking at the money. She thought it was over. She thought she had won a lottery and could go back to her quiet, desperate life. She was wrong. She hadn't just opened a safe. She had opened a door into a world she wasn't ready for, and Cyrus Valenti wasn't the kind of man who let a useful asset walk away. Here is the continuation of the story, picking up immediately after Nora left the club. Underscore, 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 underscore. The $5,000 lasted exactly 6 hours. Nora sat at her kitchen table, staring at the peeling yellow wallpaper of her studio apartment in the South Side. The table was covered in red-inked letters. Final notice, past due, immediate legal action. She had deposited the cash at the ATM on her way home, and instantly, the automatic payments for her father's funeral costs, the lingering hospital debts, and the predatory loan she'd taken to keep the lights on had swallowed it whole. It was like throwing a raw steak into a tank of piranhas. The water churned, the steak vanished, and the fish were still hungry. She was back to zero. Actually, she was negative 400. Nora rubbed her eyes. The adrenaline of the club had faded, replaced by the crushing weight of reality. She was a genius who could see the mathematical fabric of the universe, yet she couldn't figure out how to buy groceries for the week. Knock, knock, knock. The sound was precise, rhythmic. Nora froze. Nobody visited her. Her landlord just yelled through the door. She walked over and peered through the peephole. All she saw was black wool. A suit. She cracked the door, keeping the chain on. Cale, the mountain of a man who had wanted to shoot her earlier, was standing in her hallway. He looked comically large for the narrow, flickering corridor. "Miss Solis," Cale said. He wasn't asking. "Mr. Valenti requires your presence." I'm off the clock," Nora stammered. "I don't work tonight." "You do now." Cale reached out, not aggressively but with undeniable force, and snapped the flimsy door chain like it was made of dry pasta. He pushed the door open. "Hey!" Nora shouted, backing up. "You can't just—" "Pack a bag," Cale said. stepping inside and filling the room. He looked around at the squalor, the mattress on the floor, the leaking radiator, the mountain of bills. His expression didn't change. We aren't going to the club. Where are we going? The airport. Nora's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. 160 beats per minute. Tachycardia. I'm not going anywhere with you. I'll scream. If you scream, the neighbors will just turn up their TVs, a voice came from the hallway. Cyrus Valenti stepped into the light. In the grime of her apartment building, he looked like a god who had descended to the underworld just to see how the sinners lived. He wore a heavy trench coat over his suit, the collar turned up against the Chicago chill. He didn't look threatening. He looked annoyed, but beneath that, there was a strange intensity in his eyes. He walked past Cale and picked up one of the overdue bills from the table. St. Jude's Medical Center, Cyrus read. $42,000 outstanding. Interest rate at 18%. He dropped the paper. You're drowning, Nora. It's none of your business, Nora snapped, snatching the paper back. She felt exposed, ashamed. The poverty was her armor, but now he was stripping it away. You unlocked the first layer of the sanctum ledger, Cyrus said, leaning against her tiny, stained kitchenette counter. But the ledger isn't just a file. It's a map. It leads to physical locations, dead drops, safe houses. The code you broke revealed coordinates in New York City. Good for you, Nora said, crossing her arms. Hire another expert to read a map. I don't trust experts anymore, Cyrus said, his voice dropping an octave. I trusted 25 of them, and they almost cost me my empire. You saw the pattern in seconds. You see things they don't. The next layer of security is going to be harder, and I don't have time for interviews. He took a step closer to her. The air in the room seemed to vibrate. I'm offering you a job, Nora. I have a job. I serve coffee. I'm offering you a position as my personal consultant, Cyrus corrected. Starting salary is $20,000 a month, plus expenses, plus I wipe this debt. He gestured to the table, all of it. The hospital, the funeral home, the credit cards, gone. Tonight. Nora stopped breathing. 20,000. It was a lifeline. It was freedom. And if I say no, Cyrus smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf telling the lamb that the fence is already broken. You won't say no, because you're bored, Nora. I saw it in your eyes at the club. You're brilliant, and you're rotting in this cage, serving drinks to idiots who can't count to 10. You want to solve the puzzle. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a new phone. He held it out to her. The plane leaves in an hour. Come with me, and you never have to look at this wallpaper again. Stay, and you can keep counting the cracks in the ceiling until they bury you. Nora looked at the phone. Then she looked at the bills. Then she looked at Cyrus. For the first time in 7 years, the chaotic, noisy numbers in her head aligned into a single, clear equation. Risk plus opportunity. Safety. I need 10 minutes to pack, she whispered. Cyrus checked his watch. You have 5. The private jet was a Gulfstream G650. It cost $65 million. Nora had never been on a plane before, not even in coach. She sat in a cream-colored leather seat, clutching her worn-out backpack. Across from her, Cyrus was reading a dossier, sipping scotch. He hadn't spoken to her since takeoff. Nora looked out the window at the clouds. She felt like an imposter, a fraud. Stop thinking so loud, Cyrus said without looking up. I'm not saying anything. You're vibrating with anxiety. It's annoying. He closed the folder. Drink this. He pushed a glass of water toward her. We land at Teterboro in 20 minutes. Then we take a helicopter to the Hamptons. The Hamptons? Nora asked. I thought we were going to New York City. The coordinates you unlocked pointed to a specific property in East Hampton, a glass house on the cliffs. My father built it in the 90s. He never lived there. It's been empty for 20 years. What's inside? That's what you're going to find out. When they arrived, the sun was setting, casting a blood-red light over the Atlantic Ocean. The house was an architectural marvel, a stark, modernist cube made almost entirely of glass and steel, perched precariously on the edge of a jagged cliff. It was beautiful, and it was terrifying. Cale stayed by the helicopter with the pilot. Cyrus led Nora to the front door. "The key," Cyrus said, handing her a heavy, old-fashioned iron key. "Why me?" "Because if it's booby-trapped," Cyrus said dryly, "I'd prefer you open it." "You're a gentleman," Nora muttered. She turned the key. The lock tumbled with a heavy thud. The door swung open. The inside was barren. No furniture, no art. Just endless polished concrete floors and glass walls looking out at the crashing waves below. "It's empty," Cyrus said, walking into the center of the vast living room. His voice echoed. "Another dead end." "No," Nora said. She stayed by the door, her eyes scanning the room. Her brain shifted gears. She wasn't looking at a room. She was looking at a geometry problem. The floor was made of large concrete squares. The walls were panels of glass. The setting sun was streaming through the western wall, casting long, distinct shadows across the floor. "The time," Nora whispered. "What?" "The coordinates in the ledger," Nora said, walking into the room. "They had a timestamp, right? What was it?" Cyrus pulled out his phone. 1842, 6:42 p.m. Nora checked her cheap digital watch. "It's 6:40 right now." She looked at the shadows. The sun was dipping lower. The light was hitting a specific etching on the glass wall, a small, almost invisible imperfection that looked like a scratch. "Stand there," Nora commanded, pointing to a specific square on the floor. Cyrus raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me? Do you want the treasure or not? Stand on that square." Cyrus sighed, but he moved to the square she indicated. "Now what?" "Wait 2 minutes." They stood in silence. The wind howled outside. The sun sank lower. The beam of light passing through the scratch on the window moved across the floor like a laser pointer. At exactly 6:42 p.m., the beam of light hit the square Cyrus was standing on. But it didn't just hit the floor. It hit the large diamond ring on Cyrus's pinky finger, the family signet ring he always wore. The light refracted through the diamond, splitting into a prism, and hit a specific sensor hidden in the far wall that looked like a thermostat. Click! A low rumble shook the house. "Jesus!" Cyrus muttered, stepping back. The center of the concrete floor began to descend. It was a hydraulic lift. "It wasn't a digital lock," Nora said, a small smile playing on her lips. "It was a solar alignment, like the Egyptians. Your father really was dramatic." "He was a lunatic," Cyrus corrected, but he sounded impressed. He looked at Nora. The way the sunset lit up her face made her look less like a starving waitress and more like a sorceress. "After you." They stepped onto the platform and descended into the dark. The basement was a climate-controlled server farm. It hummed with power. Rows of hard drives blinked in the darkness. "This is it," Cyrus said, his voice reverent. "The Black Archive. Every deal, every bribe, every leverage point the Valenti family has collected for 50 years. It's all here." He moved to the main terminal. "If I can sync this with the Chicago network, I own the city. The Romanos, the Russians, they'll be kneeling by morning." He began to type. Nora hung back. Something felt wrong. Her eyes scanned the room. The servers were arranged in a U-shape. The wiring ran along the ceiling in neat bundles. Blue, red, yellow, blue, red, yellow. Then in the corner, blue, red, red. The pattern broke. "Cyrus," Nora said, her voice trembling. "Not now, Nora. I'm bypassing the firewall." "Cyrus, stop typing!" I said quiet. "The wiring!" Nora screamed. "It's not a server farm. It's a circuit." Cyrus froze. His finger hovered over the Enter key. "What are you talking about?" "Look at the corner," she pointed. "The cabling pattern shifts. That's not data transmission. That's C4 wiring. This isn't a vault. It's a bomb." Cyrus stared at the corner. He saw the faint, blinking red light taped behind a bundle of wires. It's a kill switch, Cyrus realized, his face paling. If I access the data, it triggers the detonator. My father didn't build this to store power. He built it to bury his successor if they were greedy. We have to get out, Nora said. Now. Suddenly the hydraulic lift they had come down on groaned and began to rise, without them on it. Cale, Cyrus shouted into his radio. Cale, bring the lift down. Static. Then a voice that wasn't Cale's. Sorry, Dom. Cale is currently taking a nap. A permanent one. Cyrus's blood turned to ice. He knew that voice. Arthur, Cyrus growled. Arthur Sterling, the family lawyer, the man who had been the executor of the will, the man who had hired the 25 experts. You were never supposed to crack the code, Cyrus. Arthur's voice echoed through the basement speakers. You were supposed to fail, so the assets would revert to the estate, to me. But then you brought in that little waitress. She's clever. Too clever. But she led you right into the grave. You killed my father, Cyrus said, the realization hitting him. He was old, he was weak, and you're just a thug in a suit. Goodbye, Cyrus. The speakers clicked off. A digital timer on the wall lit up. 5 o'clock, 4:59. 5 minutes, Cyrus said. He looked at the heavy steel blast doors that had sealed the room. We're sealed in. He's going to bury us under the Atlantic. He pulled his gun and fired at the control panel of the door. Sparks flew, but the door didn't budge. He threw his shoulder against it. Nothing. For the first time, Cyrus Valenti looked truly helpless. He slid down the wall, sitting on the cold floor. I'm sorry, he said. He looked at Nora. I dragged you into this. You should be pouring coffee in Chicago. Nora stood in the center of the room. Her breathing was shallow. Panic was clawing at her throat. She wanted to curl up and cry. She wanted to scream. But the numbers were still there. She looked at the bomb wiring. She looked at the server racks. She looked at the timer. 4:15. Shut up, Nora said. Cyrus looked up, startled. What? I said shut up. I can't hear the pattern when you're pitying yourself. Nora walked over to the wall of servers. She ripped the panel off the main terminal. Wires spilled out like guts. Arthur thinks this is a trap, Nora muttered, her hands moving fast, tracing the lines. But he's a lawyer. He doesn't know engineering. He hired someone to rig this. So every system has a logic, even a bomb. She grabbed a pair of wire cutters from a toolkit left on the floor. Cyrus, give me your belt. My belt? The buckle. I need to bridge the circuit. Cyrus ripped his belt off and handed it to her. The timer is connected to the server boot sequence, Nora said, sweat dripping down her nose. If the server's shut down, the bomb goes off. If the timer hits 0, the bomb goes off. So we're dead either way. No, we need to create a loop, an infinite loop. We need to make the computer think it's constantly rebooting, freezing the timer between seconds. She jammed the silver belt buckle between 2 exposed copper contacts on the motherboard. Sparks showered over her hands. She flinched but didn't let go. Type, Nora yelled. What do I type? Cyrus scrambled to the keyboard. The Fibonacci sequence, but in reverse. Fast! Cyrus's fingers flew across the keys. He didn't ask why. He just trusted her. 21, 13, 8, 5, 3, 2, 1, 1. Enter! Nora screamed. Cyrus hit enter. The room went black. The hum of the servers died. The silence was deafening. Nora closed her eyes, waiting for the fire, waiting for the end. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Nothing happened. Then the emergency red lights flickered on. The timer on the wall was frozen. 0:01. The bomb was dormant. Nora let go of the belt buckle and collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air. Her hands were burned, her uniform was ruined, and she was shaking uncontrollably. Cyrus sat there in the red light, staring at the screen. Then he looked at her. He crawled over to her. He didn't say a word. He grabbed her face in his hands and kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate. It was the taste of survival and adrenaline and sudden, overwhelming realization. He pulled back, breathing hard, his forehead resting against hers. "You didn't just solve the puzzle," Cyrus whispered, his voice rough. "You saved my life." Nora swallowed hard. "I just wanted the $20,000. Cyrus laughed. It was a genuine, jagged sound. "You're going to get a lot more than that," he said. He stood up and offered her his hand. "Now, let's get out of here. I have a lawyer to kill." The red emergency light in the bunker bathed them in the color of blood. Nora Solis lay on the cold concrete floor, her chest heaving, staring at the frozen timer on the wall. 0:01. 1 second. They were living in the single second between life and death. Cyrus pulled her up. His grip was iron, but his hands were shaking. The adrenaline that had sustained them during the hack was crashing, leaving behind the raw, jagged reality of their situation. "We aren't safe yet," Cyrus rasped. He looked at the heavy blast doors. "Arthur knows the timer stopped. He knows we're alive. If I know him, he's sending a cleanup crew to finish what the bomb didn't." Nora wiped soot from her cheek. "The lift," she said, her voice sounding foreign to her own ears. Stronger, harder. "You said you could override it." "I can," Cyrus said, moving to the manual hydraulic release wheel on the far wall. It was rusted, meant for maintenance only, but it's going to be slow, and we're sitting ducks on the way up. He grabbed the wheel and strained. His suit jacket ripped at the shoulder, the veins in his neck corded with effort. With a groan of metal on metal, the wheel turned. The floor shuddered, and the platform began to inch upward, crawling back toward the glass house above. The ascent took 5 agonizing minutes. Cyrus stood with his gun drawn, shielding Nora with his body. Nora didn't hide behind him, though. She stood at his shoulder, clutching the tablet, the only thing that mattered now. It contained the local copy of the Sanctum Ledger. It was the smoking gun, the shield, and the sword all in one. When the platform locked into place in the living room, the sun had fully set. The glass house was the black box reflecting the moon. The wind howled through the open front door. "Stay down," Cyrus whispered. He swept the room with his weapon. The helicopter was still on the pad, blades drooping in the wind. The pilot was gone. Cale's body was gone. The silence was absolute, which was worse than gunfire. It meant they were alone in the middle of nowhere. "He left us," Cyrus realized, lowering the gun slightly. "Arthur didn't send a crew. He left us here because he thinks we're ghost stories. He thinks even if we survived the bomb, we're stranded on a cliff in the Hamptons while he takes over the city. He underestimated you," Nora said. Cyrus turned to her. The moonlight caught the sharp angles of his face. He looked wrecked, bruised, dirty, exhausted, but his eyes were burning with a cold, terrifying fire. "No," Cyrus said. "He underestimated you." He walked to the helicopter. "Get in." "Do you know how to read an altimeter?" "I can figure it out," Nora said, climbing into the co-pilot seat. "It's just variables and rates of change." Cyrus fired the engines. The rotors whined, then roared, slicing the night air. As they lifted off, leaving the glass tomb behind, Nora looked at the sprawling darkness of the Atlantic Ocean below. She should have been terrified. Yesterday, her biggest fear was a declined debit card. Tonight, she was flying a stolen helicopter with a Mafia Don, carrying a digital nuclear bomb. "Where are we going?" she shouted over the headset. "The police!" "The police are on Arthur's payroll," Cyrus's voice crackled in her ear. "If we land at a precinct, we'll be dead in a holding cell within the hour." "Then where?" Cyrus banked the chopper hard to the west, toward the glowing halo of New York City on the horizon. "Arthur is hosting the Sterling Foundation Gala tonight at the Met," Cyrus said. "It's his victory lap. He's going to announce the merger of my family's assets with his shell companies. All the heads of the 5 families will be there. The senators, the press." "We're going to a party?" Nora asked, looking at her ruined uniform. "We're going to a funeral," Cyrus corrected. his. Underscore, 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 underscore. The flight to Manhattan took 40 minutes. Cyrus flew with a reckless precision, cutting through the skyline, bypassing air traffic control with codes he shouldn't have known. They abandoned the helicopter on a private helipad on a rooftop in the Upper East Side, a building owned by one of Cyrus's few remaining loyalists. They didn't have time to shower. They didn't have time to change. Cyrus tore the remaining sleeve off his ruined jacket, revealing the holster and the white dress shirt, stained with grease and dried blood. He looked like a fallen angel who had fought his way out of hell. He looked at Nora. She was covered in dust, her hair wild, her apron torn. "You ready?" he asked. Nora tightened her grip on the tablet. She visualized the gala, the noise, the variables. She closed her eyes for a second, finding the rhythm. Tempo, allegro con fuoco. "Let's go," she said. Underscore, 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 underscore. Underscore, 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 underscore. The Metropolitan Museum of Art was a fortress of light. Limousines idled 3 deep at the curb. Paparazzi flashbulbs popped like strobes. Inside, the Great Hall was transformed into a sea of tuxedos, silk gowns, and fake smiles. Arthur Sterling stood on a raised dais in front of the Temple of Dendur. He looked immaculate in a midnight blue velvet tuxedo. He raised a glass of champagne, basking in the applause of the city's elite. "To the future," Arthur projected, his voice smooth and cultured. "For too long, the Valenti business has been mired in the past, in brute force. But tonight, we turn a page. We embrace efficiency. We embrace—" Boom! The heavy double doors of the hall didn't just open, they were kicked open. The sound echoed like a thunderclap, silencing the orchestra instantly. 500 heads turned. Cyrus Valenti walked in. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. It wasn't just that he was supposed to be dead. It was how he looked. In a room of polished diamonds and manicured hands, he was a walking wound. He carried the violence of the underworld right into their cocktail party. And beside him walked Nora. She didn't walk behind him. She matched his stride. Her face was smudged with soot, but her chin was high. She looked at the crowd not with fear, but with the analytical detachment of a scientist looking at bacteria in a petri dish. "I think you forgot to send me an invite, Arthur," Cyrus called out. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried to the back of the room. Arthur dropped his champagne glass. It shattered on the marble, the crystal spraying over the shoes of a senator. "Security!" Arthur screamed, his composure cracking instantly. "Remove them! They are trespassers! He's unhinged!" 4 security guards started to move forward, hands reaching for concealed weapons. "Stop!" Nora yelled. It wasn't a scream. It was a command. She held up the tablet. "I wouldn't do that," Nora said, her voice steady. "Unless you want every text message you've sent to your mistresses uploaded to the Times Square Jumbotron right now." The guards hesitated. They looked at the tablet, then at Cyrus. "You're bluffing," Arthur sneered, stepping down from the dais. "You have nothing. That tablet is encrypted. Nobody could crack the ledger in less than a week. My experts said it was mathematically impossible." Cyrus smiled. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a cigarette, and lit it, in the middle of the museum. "You hired technicians, Arthur," Cyrus said, exhaling smoke. "I hired a composer." He nodded to Nora. "Play the music." Nora tapped the screen. She didn't just dump the files. She orchestrated them. Behind the stage, 3 massive projection screens, meant for Arthur's tribute video, flickered. System override. Source: The Silent Cipher. Suddenly the room was bathed in the blue light of data. On the left screen, bank transfers. Arthur Sterling, Judge Holloway, $500,000. Subject: dismissal of racketeering charges. Arthur Sterling, Deputy Mayor, $1.20 million. Subject, zoning permits for the warehouse. On the right screen, surveillance photos. Grainy, high-definition photos of Arthur meeting with rival cartel leaders. Photos of him handing over a briefcase to the man who had planted the car bomb that killed Cyrus's father. On the center screen, the kill list, a spreadsheet titled Liquidation Assets. Cyrus's name was at the top. Next to it, status, pending. Below it were the names of 3 senators currently standing in the room, sipping Arthur's wine. The room erupted. It was pandemonium. The senators who saw their names on the kill list began screaming for the police. The judge who had been bribed tried to run for the exit, slipping on the spilled champagne. Arthur stood frozen in the center of the chaos, his empire dissolving into pixels around him. "No," he whispered. "No, it's a fabrication. It's a deep fake." He reached into his tuxedo jacket. He pulled out a sleek, silver pistol. He didn't care about prison anymore. He just wanted to stop the man who had risen from the grave to humiliate him. He aimed the gun at Cyrus's chest. "Die!" Arthur screamed. Nora didn't think. She didn't calculate. She saw the angle of Arthur's arm. She saw the distance. $D = 15 feet $. She saw Cyrus standing calm, accepting the bullet. Nora threw the heavy, ruggedized tablet. She threw it like a frisbee, with all the desperate force of a woman who had already survived a bomb that day. The tablet spun through the air and slammed into Arthur's hand just as he pulled the trigger. Bang! The shot went wide, shattering a priceless Greek vase. The gun clattered to the floor. Before Arthur could dive for it, Cyrus was there. Cyrus didn't hit him. He didn't shoot him. He simply grabbed Arthur by the throat and lifted him off the ground. "You wanted the family business," Cyrus whispered into Arthur's ear, his voice a low growl that only the 2 of them could hear. "This is the business. It's not numbers. It's blood. And you don't have the stomach for it." He threw Arthur to the ground just as the SWAT teams, summoned by Nora's automated distress protocol 15 minutes ago, burst through the skylights and the side doors. "FBI, everybody down!" Laser sights danced through the smoke and confusion. Arthur was tackled, cuffed, and dragged away, screaming obscenities. The guests were herded out. The flashbulbs kept popping, capturing the image that would be on the cover of every newspaper in the world the next morning. Cyrus Valenti, standing amidst the ruins of the gala, lighting another cigarette. And Nora Solis, the invisible waitress, standing beside him, the architect of the chaos. ________________________ __________________________________________________________________ 2 hours later, the adrenaline had finally drained away, leaving a bone-deep exhaustion. They sat on the steps of the museum, the cool night air sobering them. The police had taken their statements, but Cyrus's lawyers, the loyal ones, had already arrived to shield them. Nora looked at her hands. They were trembling again. "You threw the tablet," Cyrus said. He was leaning back on the stone steps, looking up at the stars. "I calculated the trajectory," Nora lied. "I knew it would hit his radial nerve." Cyrus chuckled. "You panicked and chucked a computer at his head. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Nora laughed. It started as a giggle and turned into a sob. The stress, the fear, the relief, it all poured out. Cyrus shifted. He wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. He didn't say, "It's okay." He just held her, anchoring her to the ground. "You're free now," Cyrus said quietly. "The debt is gone. I transferred the funds while we were in the chopper. You have $5 million in an offshore account. You can go anywhere. MIT Paris. You never have to see me again." Nora pulled back. She looked at him. She saw the man who had trusted her when the experts failed. She saw the man who had come back for her in the bunker. She thought about her old life, the peeling wallpaper, the smell of stale coffee, the loneliness of being the smartest person in the room and having no one to talk to. Then she looked at Cyrus. He was a puzzle she hadn't solved yet. He was complex, dangerous, and the only person who made the noise in her head quiet down. "I don't want to go to Paris," Nora said. "No?" Cyrus raised an eyebrow. "What do you want?" "I want a job," she said. Cyrus smirked. "I told you. The consultant position is yours. 20,000 a month." "No," Nora shook her head. She stood up, brushing the dust off her skirt. She looked down at the Mafia boss. "I unlocked a $3 billion empire for you tonight. I saved your life twice. I don't want a salary." "What do you want?" "Equity," Nora said. 50%. Cyrus stared at her. His eyes widened, and then a slow, genuine smile spread across his face. It transformed him. 50%, he repeated. "You're trying to negotiate a hostile takeover of the Valenti family." "I'm not negotiating," Nora said, extending her hand. "I'm telling you the price of admission. You need a brain, Cyrus, and I need a little bit of chaos." Cyrus stood up. He took her hand. His grip was warm and solid. "Partner," he said. "Partner," she replied. He pulled her in, and this time he didn't stop. He kissed her, right there on the steps of the Met, in front of the flashing lights of the police cruisers. It was the seal on the most dangerous contract in New York history. The waitress was gone, the Queen had arrived, and the world wasn't ready for what they would do next. And that is how a waitress with a $40,000 debt brought down a crime syndicate and stole the heart of the Mafia king. Cyrus thought he was looking for a code, but he was looking for a queen. Nora thought she was looking for a way out, but she found a throne. In a world of chaos, they found their perfect equation. If you enjoyed this story of twists, betrayal, and high-stakes romance, smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story. What would you do if you found a code worth billions? Tell me in the comments below. Until next time, keep watching.